Okay, today is practice Excel test day. I posted two files online. One, it's a Word document called NFL Injury Notes, and the other one is an Excel document called NFL Injuries Practice Test. I think the best thing for y'all to do is watch the video and get the instructions down. Then hit pause, try to take the test yourself, give yourself a time limit. Once you're done, watch the rest of the video to see if you got the questions right, and then that way you can shoot me any kind of questions or concerns after you take the test. But this test will, for the most part, mirror what you'll see in next class, same types of questions. So depending on how you do on this one will largely result in how you do on the final test. So open up the Word document, NFL Injuries Notes, and I'll do it right now. Okay, let me blow up the text for you. So here are the instructions that you'll have the Excel file, and there are two tabs in the Excel file, and I'll go over both of them. The first one is NFL injuries, and that's the actual data. This is data that I grabbed at the Observer, and this lists all the injuries for NFL players in the 2018 season. The second tab is a Q&A, and that's where you'll not only find the questions to the test, but you'll also have to put some of the answers there as well. But in many cases, you'll have to show your work, and you'll do that by writing and saving the formulas, and in some cases you'll have to create new tabs with whatever filtered or data or pivot tables. So it's really, really important that you show your work and not just answer the questions to get full credit anyway. And the questions that where you have to show your work, that'll be indicated on the Q&A tab. Make sense? So let's check out the two tabs of the Excel file. I'm opening it up. Here's the actual data, and let me go over it with you real quick. You have give or take a dozen fields. Start with the NFL team, then you have the player's first and last name in two different columns, his position, his injury, his practice status, game status, the week, the game date, and the player's salary information. So there are your fields, and let me see how many rows we have. Looks like we have almost 5,000 rows. So that's the data you'll be working with for the practice test, and that's on the tab called NFL Injuries. Then there's the Q&A, and this is where you'll get the questions to the test, and you also provide some of the answers. So let's go over some of them real quick. Here's the format. So you'll see in the first three questions, you don't answer at all here. You're just showing your work, plain and simple. So question number one, add a header to column K called full name and concatenate the first and last names into that field. Makes sense? You don't put any information here, you just show your work. And you'll save that field obviously as full name. Two, add a header to column L called salary category and use an if statement or an if formula to indicate if a person made more or less than $3 million. Again, you don't answer the question here, you just answer it in the NFL Injuries tab. And I'll go over the next one. In the next three columns, use the game date field to create new columns called game month, game day, and game year. So you'll write a formula that breaks out the game date into month, day, and year. So those types of questions you don't answer in this tab right here. But the next several questions you will. For instance, what is the name of the injured player who earned the highest salary? You don't need to create a tab. You don't need to show your work. All you do is answer with his name right here. And down the line, what was the salary of the highest paid player? Again, just answer here. And you can see the questions. We'll likely have more during the test, probably twice as many, but this will give you a halfway decent understanding of what's going to be on the test and the different formulas that you'll need to know. Okay? Now I'm also going to send you, if you haven't received it already, an Excel document or a Word document called Excel Tricks, and I'll show you that right now. Here's the file called Excel Tricks that I sent out, and I'll resend it out if you haven't received it already. But this shows all the steps or all the formulas that we went over this year. And it starts with importing data and inserting a row, inserting a column, freezing panes, and then sort and filter, and then you get into the actual formulas. Average, sum, min and max, which we didn't really touch on, but they're pretty self-explanatory. Month, day, year, proper, upper, lower, and so on and so on. So feel free to use this. I think it'll come in handy. And again, I recently just sent it out to you if you haven't received it in a previous post. So feel free to use the Word document called Excel. Now what I would do is go back to the Excel document, the NFL injuries one, hit pause on the video and try to answer all the questions. Once you get done, replay it, because in about 5 seconds I'm going to go over all the answers. Okay? Good luck, guys, and let's see how you do. Question 1 was to add a header to column K, call it full name, and concatenate the first and last names into that field. You didn't have to write an answer in the Q&A, but obviously you had to show your work. So here's how you did that. Column K, full name, and what you wanted to do is add both the first and last name of the player together. So columns B and C. And here is that formula. Equal concatenate, open parentheses, B2, ampersand, quote unquote, ampersand C2. And you should have known that you're on the right path if column B and C lit up, changed colors. And then once you have that, obviously you copy it down, and to proof yourself, you can see how all the names are concatenated. So again, it is equal, concatenate, B, ampersand, quote unquote, ampersand, and then C. That's how you concatenate the names. Should have been easy. We've done it a number of times. So let's move on to the second question. Add a header to column L, call it salary category, and use an if statement or an if formula to indicate if a person made more or less than $3 million. You don't have to answer here, but we did have to show our work. So let's go back to our NFL injuries data. Add a column L. We had to add a header called salary category. And here is your formula. Equal if J2, because J was our salary, right there. So equal if J2 is greater than 3 million, comma, quote unquote, more than 3 million. And if it's not, then it's comma, quote unquote, less than 3 million. And remember, because J is a number field, it's not a text, that 3 million does not get quotes around it. You would have gotten an error if you tried to do J greater than quote unquote 3 million. That would have gave you an error. So again, the if statement, equal if, open parentheses, J2 is greater than 3 million, then comma, more than 3 million, close the quote, comma, less than 3 million, and copy it down. And you can sort of eyeball it and see if you got the answer right. So 2.4 million is less than 3, 4.8 million is more than 3, and copy it down. Make sense? That was the if statement. Number 3. In the next 3 columns, use the game date field to create a new column called game month, another new column called game day, and a final one called game year. And remember the month, day, and year formulas? You may have tried the right, left, and mid. That would not have worked. So it's the month, day, and year, and very simple. For the month, it is equal month, then I2. Copy it down. Same thing with the get day, equal day, then I2, and year, equal year, I2. And these are really easy to fact check. This one, just pick it out of the blue, 10/28/2018, 10/28/2018. And this was a sort of a cleaning data question. Okay, moving on. What injured player earned the highest salary? So how would you find that? We didn't have to create a new tab. All we had to do is sort the data. All right, so select all, sort, custom sort. We don't want to sort on full name, we want to sort on salary, largest to smallest. Okay, so that what injured player, and because these are all injured players, we don't have to filter anything. They were all injured. So Tyrell Williams, and his salary was 6.98 million. Go to the Q&A. Tyrell Williams, 6.9 million. What injured player earned the lowest salary? Now you can scroll down to the bottom of your data to find that, because he's listed down the bottom, which would have been Cincinnati Bengals Christopher Uzomah, whom earned $513,000. Or you could just custom sort it again from lowest to highest this time. So salary, smallest to largest, click OK, and scroll back to the top, and there's Christopher. So Christopher Uzomah, who made $513,000. There we go, and there we go. How y'all doing so far? Not bad, huh? Next question, and you can see I tipped you off by saying you have to filter this data. So using a filter, select and paste all injured running backs into a new Excel tab. Label that tab NFL running backs. So we select and paste all into a new tab, NFL running backs. How would you do that? Well, you'd start with your data. Right here, we're just interested in position. So you filter the data, custom sort, filter, and you just grab running backs. Right here, click OK. Now just my running backs grabbed. I copy and paste this into the running backs tab, and here they are right here. Now I can see what kind of questions the test asked. So these are just running backs that I filtered. Here it is. Of the injured running backs, who earned the most money, and how much did that running back earn? So who earned the most, and how much did he earn? Now that I got all my running backs filtered in a tab called running backs down here, Let's just sort the data. And let's sort largest to smallest on the salary. It's already like that. Click OK. And it should be Adrian Peterson, who made $6.8 million. So Adrian Peterson, $6.8 million. Moving along, next question. Using a filter, select and paste all records for players whose game status for week 1 was out, and label that tab out week 1. So we need game status out, and we also need week to equal 1. So we'll want to do 2 filters, right? And here they are. Let me unfilter these for you. So game status we want to filter, and week 1 we want to filter. Game status has to be out. Okay. And week 1 is the only one we want. Okay. So you select and paste all these records into the new tab called Out Week 1, and here you go. Here they are. And we have give or take 25 records. Then you need to do 2 different formulas. You need to average the salary, and you need to sum the salary. So the first formula for average, equal average J2 to J26, and to sum it, equal sum J2 to J26. So the 2 answers, the answer for average is 3.7 million. The answer for sum is 92.7. 3.7, 92.7. Again, you had to filter it twice, copy and paste it into a new worksheet, and run the 2 formulas. Using a pivot table, create a pivot table that counts how many injured players each team had. Create a pivot table that counts how many injured players each team had. Okay, we can do that. And here's the pivot table. You would take team and drag it to rows because we want to count injuries by team. And what do you want to count? You want to count injuries. So injuries to values, and that gives you this. Cincinnati Bengals had 6, Washington Redskins had 8, and so on. And the 2 questions that we wanted to find were what team had the most injuries and how many, what team had the least injuries, how many, and how many did the Carolina Panthers have. Okay. Navigate back to my pivot table. The team with the least, Cincinnati Bengals at 6. The team with the most, since it's sorted, top to bottom, New York Jets with 28. And Carolina Panthers, you can just scroll, there's not too many teams, 30 of them or so, had 198. So Bengals with 6, Jets with 228, and Carolina Panthers with 198. Here they are. Jets, Bengals, Panthers. So all this makes sense? Let's try the next one. Using a pivot table, create a pivot table that counts what week had the most players with the game status as questionable. And what are the 3 weeks where most players were listed as questionable? So using a pivot table, create a pivot table that counts what weeks had the most players with game status as questionable. Okay, we can do that. So here's our pivot table. We wanted to count weeks, so you drag weeks into rows. And here's all our weeks. Right? Now we had to filter it on game status. So you drag game status into filters, and you turn your filter just to questionable. Right there. And again, you wanted to count So you take game status and drag it into count. There we go. And week 12 had the most at 116, and week 1 had the least at 38. So the answer to the question of what 3 weeks had the most players whose game status was questionable, that would be the top 3. Week 12, week 14, and week 13. And of course you get this by sorting the data. And here you go, 12, 14, and 13. Moving along, create a pivot table that counts how many times each injury occurred. Call it common injury. Now the question, what are the 3 most common injuries other than unknown? So we're creating another pivot table that counts how many times each type of injury occurred, and we call it common injury. So here's the pivot table, and of course you would drag injury into rows that lists all the injuries that could appear, and you want to count them. So you can drag team into count, and here they are. Knees happened 434 times, and you get that, of course, by sorting the data. Clicking on the data, custom sort, largest to smallest. So the 3 most common, knees, ankles, and hamstrings. Here you go, knees, ankles, and hamstrings. And you'll also get a couple questions like this on the test. And they are subjective, but they also are important. So something like this. Come up with 2 filters or pivot tables, or a combination of your own, to show data that you think might lead to an interesting story. Label those filters and pivot tables as story 1 and story 2 in a new tab, and write one sentence about your 2 findings. And we've been doing this the entire year. We sort data, we filter data, we write formulas and create pivot tables, and then what do? In a Word document or a Google Doc, we put our findings. So that's what I wanted you to do. And you would put your findings, story 1, write your sentence, story 2, write your sentence, and of course you create your tab down here. And the more interesting your finding, the harder or the more work you put into it, the better. You could obviously just sort the data from top to bottom, say so-and-so earned the most, and so-and-so played with the Cardinals. But would that lead to an interesting story? Probably not. So it's subjective, but it's also important. Here's my pivot table, and it shows the number of weeks that each individual player made and their team as well. So I drug full name to rows, I drug team to rows, and I counted the weeks. Full name to rows, team to rows, and counted the weeks. Now what this shows me is Robbie Bortles, Matthew Forte, James Carpenter, Frank Gore, and Cam. They all missed 16 weeks in that year. So my sentence would go something like this. 5 players missed all but 1 game in the 2018 season. The Jets had 2 of those players. Something simple, but also something insightful. Remember, there's 17 weeks to the NFL season because you have a bye. So these guys missed 16 weeks, not quite the entire season. So 5 players missed all but 1 game in the 2018 season. The Jets had 2 of those players. And the final question on the test, using a pivot table, what was the average salary for all injured Carolina Panthers players? Now I did this in 2 parts. First, I filtered out just the Carolina Panthers players, and I pasted them into a new worksheet called Carolina. So here they are, just Carolina Panthers players, all their records, filtered out and pasted into a new worksheet, and there are 198 records right there. Then I created a pivot table off of this data, and I called it Average Carolina. Now here's my pivot table. I have all the Carolina Panthers players here, and you can see my data. It's just the name, so I drug full name into the rows, average salary into the values, but I also drug full name into values as well. And that's important because some people missed multiple games. So in this case, Alex Arma missed 2 games. Cam missed 16. Charles Johnson missed 10. So when Excel averages all the numbers, which is fine, it's taking Julius Peppers and his 14 games and averaging them. So this total right here isn't necessarily accurate. I'd have to run my own average. So watch, this says it's 3.9 million. When you do the actual formula, equal average B4 to B48, right here, it comes out to more than that, B4 to B48. Hit enter. Let's turn that into a currency. And that's saying it's 4.065. So again, you have to write the average formula yourself because it's counting. We can't see it, but it's counting Cam as 16 times, Charles Johnson as 10, which throws off the average of all the other players. But if you write the formula, there you go, 4.06 million. Now you may have to do that on the test. You may have to sort the data, filter the data, and then create a pivot table off that filter. Just because I say use a pivot table doesn't mean you don't have to filter it beforehand. So feel free to break up the questions or the steps of each question in parts, and as long as you get the final answer, obviously that's all we care about. So how'd you guys do? Decent questions? Let me know, and I'm around, and we'll get this test going next class. See you guys.